Good afternoon. Welcome to Lunch Money, your online and social media home for workouts, special situations, and capital raising professionals. Now, in the advertising, it said not only are we the online and social media home for capital raising professionals, etc., but also for people who like to live life 1/4 mile at a time, which was a Fast and Furious reference. But our planned content cannot go ahead today for reasons that I'm not sure I'm able to discuss. So I'm going to have to leave that as a little bit of a mystery. You may be able to fill in the blanks yourself, given that there was a lot of in and out activity in and outside the courts on that particular matter. I have instead invited two special friends of Lunch Money and two of Sydney's leading corporate restructuring professionals. That's Sule Arnautovic, who is a partner at Hall Chadwick, and Daren Anderson, who's the managing partner at ERA Legal. G'day, gents. How are you going?
Excellent.
Now, Daren, are you able to say the legal reasons why we can't do our regular show today, or have I said enough already?
I don't agree with the alleged legal reasons why you can't do your show today, but apparently someone's commenced a court proceeding to stop the Ferrari auction, and some people think that is sub judice. I don't think it is. I think sub judice relates to jury trials, but if they won't come, Nick, there's not much you can do about it. So here's Sule and I here at the last minute. So, and this could go a bit like a jazz concert. It could go all Miles Davis, or it could go all Wilbur Wilde. So hopefully we're more Miles Davis at the end of the day, Nick, than Wilbur Wilde.
Well, Daren, you are one of our, in spite of the fact you're a lawyer, you are one of our least cautious guests on Lunch Money. So that's okay. Look, I mean, I guess from now on we can say that anything you say on Lunch Money could be used as evidence, and maybe used in a court of law. Look, let's go to Sule. What have you been up to lately, Sule? I saw that you had an ad recruiting. Does that mean that you're filling some holes, or you're expecting that restructuring wave to finally crash on the shore?
Well, I think different from last year, I think the uptick in restructuring work will come on a lot quicker than it did at the start of 2021. I think the big difference between this time around and the end of last year is a couple of issues. Not as much government support, I would say, as a high level, no insolvent trading moratorium, and what I think is quite a big impact is the general lack of confidence that business owners have. Will they double down? Will they refinance and go again? Or will they clean the slate and start again? I just think the turn up in restructuring work will increase a lot quicker this time around than it did at the start of 2020.
So, are you planning any holidays for Christmas, or will it be early 2022?
Let me know where I can go, Nick, with some certainty, and I'll let you know. It's a bit difficult at the moment to make any plans.
You've got a little bit of room in your backyard, probably. I'm sure you can pitch a tent and get some babbling brook sounds going. What you do, obviously you speak to a lot of people. You're probably a little bit like me. The phone rings a lot, and there's a lot of people that want to know what if scenarios, but whether or not they actually manifest into immediate work is something else. I mean, are you getting a lot of inquiries from hospitality, or is it manufacturing, or is there anything in particular that stands out at this time around?
I think there's still a fair general inertia problem at the moment. Out of sight, as a whole, a lot of people are triggering restructuring and solvency appointments at the moment. I don't think the pressure from the statutory bodies or the financiers or anyone in particular. And I think it's just a case of time will come when reality prevails. People have to make these decisions, but at this point in time, I think most people can agree in our particular industry that they're rather quiet. And by the look of the appointments over the last few weeks, they've certainly been trending now trending smaller. So no, we had some benefit with some interesting, sizable work on these lockdowns, but things are relatively quiet at this point in time. But we do expect it to ramp up significantly in the first quarter of 2022.
Right. Okay. All right. And Daren, you have been busy this week.
Yeah, we've been busy, fortunately, all through the lockdown. So, which has been good for us, not necessarily with the insolvency work, but with general commercial work and lending work. We've got a bit of insolvency work on. We were fortunate to get a clarifying judgment in the Supreme Court of New South Wales this week in relation to the operation of Section 588 FL of the Corporations Act, which in simple terms is the section that insolvency practitioners often rely upon for the vesting of security interests. So that judgment has clarified the law quite significantly.
So can you just dumb that down for us? There's a lot of sections and what have you. Just for
Sure.
the average punter,
So
what does all that mean?
Essentially, 588 FL of the Corporations Act works in a number of scenarios, such that if a company has been placed into liquidation or administration and the security interest has not been registered prior to the company being placed into administration or liquidation, the security interest vests in the company. Essentially, it's invalid. The more common scenario is where the security interest has been registered prior to the liquidation or the administration, or it was registered, but the registration wasn't done within 20 business days, and the company goes into liquidation or administration within 6 months of the date of the registration. However, that wasn't really what the case was about. The way the section has also been interpreted, and the way that ERA had interpreted it prior to this decision coming down, was that once a company had been placed into administration, if the company wanted to borrow money, the lender had to get its security interest essentially approved by the court. Or perhaps not approved by the court, more technically, you had to get the registration time amended under the Act. Otherwise, upon the registration of the security interest, it would immediately vest. So it's essentially the security interest without court approval would be invalid. And as you know, Nick, despite my me not being all that conservative on lunch money, as a lawyer for lenders, I'm very conservative in my advice, and the advice has always been to go to court and get the approval. But as a result of this case, that's no longer necessary.
So essentially, what that means is in America, they have obviously the Chapter 11 regime, and that seems to come up on a regular basis as to whether or not that should come into Australia. But one of the features of the Chapter 11 regime is a debtor in possession funding, or DIP funding as they call it, where once the company's gone into Chapter 11, or over here it's obviously into voluntary administration, once it's gone into Chapter 11, a new lender can come in to provide funding for the restructure. You're saying that essentially with this decision that you've achieved this week, that it makes it, whilst it's not the same as debtor in possession funding in the US, obviously, but it does make it easier for a funder to come in to fund a restructure, or to at least fund the administration of the business.
It certainly makes it easier, because it makes it easier and a little bit cheaper, because you don't have to go to court to get the approval of the court. As I said, it's not strictly approval. You have to get the registration time of the security interest amended under 588 FM of the Act, but it certainly makes it a lot easier to achieve.
Okay. There are times when I know we've been involved where we've wanted to provide some assistance, and the advice is, your advice has been, look, you've got to go to the court. And whilst I understand that in these circumstances the courts do operate relatively quickly, it is absolutely an obstacle to proceeding with matters, particularly given that these things are so time sensitive. I guess are these things that are more functional in the breach, or actually in going into a transaction? Like, is it something that we're going to see as saving someone's backside post fact, or is it going to come into the decision whether or not a business can be saved or not in the first place?
You mean the decision? From this week?
Yeah.
I think it'll put a lot of lenders, lawyers, and a lot of insolvency practitioners' minds at rest, because until this decision, I'm sure that the section was honoured more in the breach. People were ignoring the literal reading of the section, so I think it puts a lot of people at rest. But you've got to jump through all those other obstacles, Nick. In any event, dealing with FEG and others when you're lending to distressed industries or distressed companies, all those other obstacles are still in place, of course. So you're one of the experts at lending to distressed entities and helping them recover. So you know your way through that minefield. But it's certainly going to be an area, I think, over the next couple of years when the house of cards does start to topple as a result of this crisis we've been in for almost 2 years. Distressed lending is going to be a very big industry, I think. So,
right. Well, we don't want to encourage too many people to come into it. Wait till we've had our fill first. After we run out of money, then everyone else is welcome to join the party. Sule, obviously, you're the administrator of a company, and I want to come in and provide some funding to help the restructure along. Before this decision, there was a great big question mark, and Daren would say there was no question mark at all. The court had to approve an incoming financier. Do you think this is going to make life easier if you don't have to go to court? Obviously, as Daren says, you've still got to make sure you're doing the right thing and you're ticking all the boxes, and you're not going to make enemies of our friends at FEG, for example. But do you see this as being of something that'll assist?
I think the whole concept of borrowing money in administrations has been quite tricky for people like myself for many moons, and people have tried to contract out a liability and do all sorts of things. There's one thing atypical about what's happening with what Daren is talking about is administrators will just be a lot more conservative in terms of borrowing money or trading through during their appointments, and seek to get all sorts of loan funds or trade on finance measures approved by the court before they do anything. Of course, it's great to tick all the boxes, but as you both know, especially on bigger assignments, there's always some pressing need and some urgency, and what you end up finding is practitioners like myself, you make commercial decisions in the early part of administrations, you implement a process, and then you go to the court to plead for forgiveness to try and support the commercial decision making. So I don't think much has changed. Administrators will always be conscious of and receivers conscious of their liabilities, and more in our space, the courts will be asked to bless our decision making. But there is always a risk and issues to traverse as a restructuring person borrowing money in our formal role, because of the position of financiers, because of the position of employees, the Department of Employment, general liabilities owed for borrowing the money, and the obligation to creditors further down the line. It's a necessary evil, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, that said, sometimes, as you know better than I do, I mean, sometimes it's a matter of, well, if we can get some money into this business in the next 3 days, because we've got payrolls and, suppliers are going to pull supply, and, the landlord's going to kick us out, whatever it might be, it could be the difference between the business being saved and the business just having to go straight into liquidation. But I guess, as we all know, there's no heroes medals. I mean, if someone's got an axe to grind, the best of intentions can sometimes certainly come into question.
Yeah, ultimately, there's a bit of a dichotomy with the decision process, because you go into these administrations trying to fulfil the objective of what the law is trying to do, and that saves something, save some business, save some business, get some result, and sometimes those outcomes don't prevail. Whether it's a vote that goes against you, or a sale of business that doesn't get underway, or a deed of arrangement promise that falls through, then unfortunately the decision to continue to trade and or take risk is viewed with the benefit of hindsight, and that's when criticisms are levelled. So there's always going to be a divergence between commercial risk taking and trying to get a result, and ticking all the legal boxes in what we do.
Darren, you were going to say something?
I just want to talk a bit about the exciting news of the day, that the 11 a.m. daily doom and gloom lecture has ended from today, which I thought was really made my weekend.
Well, I mean, look, I have had a look on Twitter, and there are those who say it's a travesty of democracy, but I think that you would have to sort of put away any sharp implements in my room as you watched that, because it wasn't good for your mental health. And I don't know. I think they should. Yeah, look, I don't know. But I guess what was announced this week, one of the things that our Premier in New South Wales certainly said was that we've got to get ready for reopening up. But I am interested in professional services. I mean, obviously in accounting and in law, there is a lot of labour that transfers overseas. We get in the legal profession and the accounting profession, you see a lot of people come in from all parts of the world, really. And that may well be temporary or long term. Do you think it's going to be hard when you do get busy? Is it going to be hard to recruit? We have had said on Lunch Money before, people think that particularly with the international borders being closed, and also with the state borders being closed, because while we may open up in New South Wales, where we can go is a question. Is that going to impact on law firms and accounting firms, Darren?
Can I just say this? It's extraordinarily hard to recruit right now, because my discussion with recruiters, as far as recruiting senior lawyers are concerned, is it doesn't matter how good the opportunity or the amount of money offered, even if the amount of money is significantly above the odds, people will not leave their position because they are so concerned about what the future is going to bring. So if they're in a job and they're secure, they're not going to move, even though they may have thought about moving beforehand. Regarding the overseas issue, I don't know, because we can all work from home now. We've all learned how to work remotely. So I think there might be some opportunities, because those people who you might employ from overseas, who you would usually want them to be on the ground in your office in person, we've learned so much about working from home, it might open opportunities.
Yeah, okay. What do you think, Sule?
I think in terms of impacts for the big four accounting firms, and probably the larger multinational legal firms, there could be various impacts. But one of the benefits I think to come out of this whole diabolical situation over the last couple of years is an understanding that you can have fewer face-to-face meetings, and you can still operate remotely and get various things done. It doesn't obviously appeal to every situation, especially extremely important, sensitive ones. But that's going to change international flow of staff, certainly in accounting firms and big legal firms, in terms of secondments and or relocations, transferring within the organisation for years to come.
I don't think, Nick, big accounting firms and big legal firms are going to open up until probably the second quarter of next year anyway. Even ERA, I think there's going to be a big reluctance. I'm going to be reluctant to go back to the office in October, personally, if I've got to wear a mask inside my office. Whilst I'd comply with the health order and have my staff comply with it, I think it's oppressive to require your staff to come to the office and wear a mask all day inside the office. So I think we're going to have a lot of reluctance until that wearing masks inside offices rule is lifted. Most people aren't going to want to return to the office.
Now we are very privileged, you guys, that we have Deanne Tyndale. Welcome back to the comment section, Deanne. It's great to see you. And I was just thinking of Perth as Daren was talking there. Deanne is based in Perth. She does executive recruitment, particularly in the turnaround space. She sort of parachutes in CEOs and those C-suite people. And she says here, in my experience, good people will move if there's a great opportunity at a new employer. If it's more of the same, no chance you'll entice them. So I guess what she's saying, I guess that sort of speaks a little bit to what you're saying, Daren. If it's going to be just, law firm A to law firm B with maybe some sort of incremental benefit, it won't work. If it's a really exciting opportunity, then maybe that'll be the difference. Great. Thank you very much, Deanne, for tuning in today, even though we don't have any Ferraris or auction action. So that's interesting. I mean, look, there is a newspaper article here. A post-lockdown labour war has already started, says the Financial Review. They're quoting Steve McCann from Crown Resorts. Having seen how the economy can bounce back once the lockdown shackles are lifted, McCann is wary of being caught short of good staff in a market where labour supply will be throttled by border restrictions. And he has talked about, they're also quoting Wilson's head of investment strategy, John Lockton, who says there are signs of what he's calling labour hoarding. So what they're saying here is that some companies that don't need their current staffing levels are hoarding their labour anyway, I guess in anticipation of labour being hard to get hold of. I suppose they're also saying that this, the vaccine rollout means management can see that the company should be back to more normal trading conditions by December. I mean, all of this is sort of gobbledygook, I suppose, to people in WA, for example, who, they're just leading normal lives, except that they don't get to see regular visits from the like of any of us. I mean, do you see any of that so-called labour hoarding in the professions, Sule?
It's going to be very interesting, Nick. Fundamentally, it's very difficult to prepare. I mean, we've been given some sort of hopeful notice that sometime in middle October there'll be some sort of easing of restrictions, at least in New South Wales. But really, what does that mean? Does that just mean we can get a haircut and go to the pub? I don't know. After 2 or 3 days into the sort of hopeful promise, what that means for professional services staff. It's just very unclear. I suppose there's a glimmer of hope. The devil's in the detail, and at this point in time, we don't really have the detail.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I will take issue with you, Sule, I think it was you that said a little earlier that you think that that we've got used to doing Zoom and what have you. I don't know about that. I mean, I've sent emails to some of my best connections this week around the country. So, Perth, for example, I used to go to Perth 20 times a year. And, I do think that people, particularly in Perth and Queensland and Victoria for that matter, if you're a Sydney person that actually makes the effort to haul your backside across the country on a regular basis, you will get more traction than someone who just, picks up the phone every now and then. Now, of course, better traction still is to have boots on the ground. So I don't know. I personally think that, not being able to travel is a major issue. We've got a comment. Yeah.
You don't need to go to Perth if you're in Sydney now, because when you walk down the main street of Sydney today, it's got the same amount of people as you'd find on a Friday afternoon in Perth. So it's just like being in Perth.
Yeah, I know, but yeah, different people though, different people. Tim Ellis from Brisbane says, I've attended a number of professional offices in Brisbane where everyone is wearing a mask. However, they remove the mask when they sit down with a client with a glass of water or tea and coffee at the table. Does that mean, Peter, are masks mandated inside the office in Queensland? I'm not sure about that, but I guess what you're saying is that people are sort of working around the more uncomfortable aspects of those situations. Look, guys, we have survived 27 minutes of total off the cuff over a cup of coffee chat. We are going to wrap up in a couple of minutes, and we do have a good number of viewers, believe it or not. If you are watching this, now is your chance to shoot that question in before we log off. And I will say that for those who were wanting to see Ian Hyman and Richard Rort talk about Ferraris, that will happen. And it'll be very interesting to see what happens today with that case, but that will happen in the future. Guys, we're going to wrap up. So I want to say thank you very, very much to both of you for joining. I'm going to give you one last comment before we go. So Sule, any sort of parting comments?
Besides me running around this location trying to get a decent data connection, apologies for that, but being a last-minute call-up, I suppose, Nick, I've got some sort of excuse. There's interesting times ahead. We don't quite know how it's all going to work. Stress lending space will be busy next year.
Sule, it's been awesome having you. Thank you very, very much. Daren, your last words before we sign off?
In case I don't make it on back on Lunch Money before we open up, I just encourage everyone, as soon as we open up and the restaurants and the hairdressers, not that I have a great deal of need for hairdressers, but as soon as they open back up, get out, start spending some money, support those businesses that have been hit the hardest by the lockdown. Yeah, get out and open your wallet up and spend some money in your local restaurant, your local pub,
All right.
and show some support.
All right, good words. Good words for you to finish up on, Daren. I will just say my usual. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. The Lunch Money podcast. Thank you very much for those who've persisted with us today. We, as I say, we had a show planned, and literally last minute, I called Daren and Sule and asked if they wouldn't mind lending a hand, and I'm very, very grateful to them for doing so. Thank you very much for joining us. Cheers.